What's it going to take to win? Well, first, it will take a strong private sector work ethic. It's going to take entrepreneurs with vision and with the capacity to innovate. But it will also take, as it took every other time in our history, strong, bold participation from the public sector to create the conditions for success and to help the fledgling industry grow strong. Let us not sacrifice our future prosperity on the altar of a childish faith that the market will somehow fix everything. And finally, and this could be the hardest part, we must have the courage to pull support away from the technologies of the past, from the fuels of the past, just as we did earlier with riverboats, wagon trains, whale oil, and vacuum tubes. All of these things were supported in their time, and all of these things needed to fade away at a later time. And it takes courage and a willingness to resist political pressure to allow that to happen. There's a lot of detail and other examples that I'd like to share with you this morning, but time doesn't allow it. But I do want to address a couple of very critical points that always come up in regard to America's energy transformation. When we talk to business people, there's often a focus on how much energy costs might go up as a result of cap and trade or some similar program. And people think very naturally that if energy costs for their company go up, that's going to be bad for their company. And by extension, that's going to be bad for the country. And unfortunately, this kind of thinking crowds out everything else you might have to say. If people are so focused on what's going to happen to costs going up and this discussion about is it a tax and so on, that we really need to get through that. So we must help people understand that energy costs are already high, but we don't realize it because much of the costs are hidden. Imagine if signs at gas stations told the truth. We pay a little bit for gas when we cross the curb, and we pay a lot for gas when we pay our taxes. We don't even know exactly what gasoline really costs. It could be as much as $10 per gallon or even more. Some say it is. But we do know that what you pay at the pump is just a small part of the total cost, and the rest of the cost you pay on April 15th. A big chunk of this is all that military spending, which works out to about $1 a gallon. Another big chunk is people dying younger than they should because of particulates and other kinds of pollution. Another big chunk is the direct and indirect economic losses that come about because we're sending billions of dollars overseas when that same money could be spent on technology and people and services here, which would have a multiplier effect on additional demand and consumption. There's at least $4 in total hidden costs that we can point to fairly readily and without a lot of argument, and there could be a lot more. Would you like to pay less taxes? I know I would. And one way that we can all pay less taxes is if we stop using energy in ways that create a lot of hidden costs. And by the way, 2 years without Persian Gulf oil would pay for the bank bailout, the entire bank bailout. Think about that. So when we're talking about putting a price on carbon through cap and trade, we're not really raising the cost of energy. What we're doing is we're ensuring that the cash price fully reflects the overall price so that the market sends the right signals and people make the right decisions about how much energy to use. It's about recognizing the costs that are already there. Remember, this is not about polar bears. It's about making good business decisions. Now, when you do this analysis, and you can do it for coal as well, and the answers are pretty similar, what it tells us when we start paying attention to the real cost is that we're already past the crossover point where renewables are cheaper than conventionally generated electricity. It only looks like they're not cheaper because so far we've deluded ourselves about the total cost of electricity. We think it costs more if we don't pay attention to the true cost, if we only pay attention to the price of the pump. But that's not the reality. Another story we need to tell, we need to remind people of, is that economic growth is right nearby. The benefits of the energy revolution are clear enough in Silicon Valley, but they're a lot less clear in coal country and in the struggling industrial Midwest. It's important to connect the dots to show people that the energy revolution brings prosperity everywhere, not just in high-tech centers or the Mojave Desert or the windy high plains, but jobs in your city, your district, your state. This is what matters to people. And we must help people move past the fear of what climate protection will do to consumers. There's a lot of talk about cost per household. The truth is that if this is done right, if permits are auctioned, and if the proceeds are used partly for transition assistance, we can do everything we need to do to prepare for the future for about $1 a household a day. $1 a day. It's a cheap price to pay for jobs and better security for the long term. Let me switch gears now. I've shared with you a little bit of the argument and the way of presenting the situation that we use with business audiences that are not, from the get-go, sympathetic to what we need to do. Now I'd like to introduce New Voice of Business as an organization and give you a sense of where we are and what we're doing and how you can get involved. New Voice of Business is an organization of individual business professionals from companies of all sizes at all stages of career. Our members are individuals, not institutions, because individuals, people like you, people who are passionate about change, are often not yet the ones controlling the C-suite, but they are the ones who are ready to make a difference. And no one who is prepared to lend a hand should be left out. Too often the major business organizations like the U.S. Chamber are dominated by a small number of very large companies and the C-suite people in them, and that's really a very narrow voice, not at all representative of business as a whole. Our aim is to change the conversation, to reframe. Today, the media frames this issue as jobs versus polar bears. If this continues, we're lost. Especially in a recession, jobs will always trump polar bears. We need to get the media writing a different kind of story, a different kind of narrative, a story of innovation versus clinging to the past. So instead of when the administration announces a new policy and the reporter goes out and gets one speaker from the U.S. Chamber to say it's terrible and one speaker from Sierra Club to say it's great, we need a different kind of approach. And we need to show to the policymakers, elected and otherwise, that the business community is truly divided on this issue. Because right now they see the business community as monolithically opposed, or nearly monolithically opposed, to doing something. We need to show the policymakers that while some business people oppose taking action, many favor it, and many business people see the opportunity for their company, for their community, and for America. Often the policymakers want to do the right thing, but they need cover. They get it in many cases, but they can't risk being painted as anti-job or anti-growth. They need the business community standing up next to them. We've been doing this for a couple of years in California. We worked on something called Million Solar Roofs, which is basically an incentive and subsidy for solar photovoltaic installation. And by mobilizing support from the business community, we not only were able to help push the thing through, but get it budgeted at a higher level than what anyone had anticipated. And after that, we worked on AB 32, the Global Warming Solution Act in California. Again, we helped mobilize business support so that the state legislators and the governor could do what was clearly the right thing here. Now we're turning our attention to the Waxman-Markey bill. You probably are already familiar with that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what the bill itself is, other than to say it's a comprehensive solution to climate change which addresses all the key elements. And this chart shows the importance of mobilizing new voices. Each bar on this chart represents one of the committee members on the key House Energy and Commerce Committee that had to pass on this before the bill could move on. And the ones who are shown in red are people who announced that they were opposed, the oranges were the maybes, and the greens were the yeses, the supporters. Now the height of the bar shows how much money each of these people in Congress took from folks who are essentially the companies that are adding the carbon to the atmosphere. And as you can see, there's an incredibly strong correlation between how much money weigh in and what kind of positions these people in Congress took. This is the way it works in Washington. And this is why it's so important that business people of all kinds, at all levels, in all different kinds of corporations, weigh in and explain to their representative the importance of taking action on these critical issues.